think we should be good.
Okay, all right, I'd like to call to order the Transportation Advisory Committee meeting for Tuesday, September 17th, 2024. Can we have a roll call, please?
Yes, Mr. Rendelman.
Here.
Ms. Donovan. Here. Mr. McEnroth.
Here.
Mr. Simmons.
Present.
Ms. Wadsworth. Here. Mr. Morgan.
Here.
All right.
And Chetamir is on the phone.
And we got Chetamir on the phone. All right. Any public comments? I'm assuming we do not?
None.
All right, so we can move on to general business, and that would be the approval of the meetings from our last meeting all the way back on June 18th. Does anybody have any additions, changes, corrections for the minutes? If so,
I move to approve the minutes for the last meeting.
we have a second.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? And those are good to go. So we will move on to item 4 and new business and public works report.
All right, thank you. Good evening, Dana Webb, Public Works Director. I'm going to start with an item not on a slide. So I would like to share that yesterday, ODOT updated the signs on 213 for the speed limit.
We're all looking at you, Jeff.
They did, so they
Put a stop sign up there yet?
Nope. So just for those of you who haven't been on the TAC for a while, this effort started back in August of 2021 when I submitted the request for a speed zone review on Highway 213 between Redland Road and I-205. It took ODOT until November of 2023 to issue an updated speed zone. And then it took an additional 10 months to change out the signs, but we've made it.
Since I was gone for the last 13 days, I haven't noticed.
So our communications group is doing some social media outreach to share that information with the traveling public. I just didn't get a slide in there because I didn't know this until yesterday. So back to our regular agenda. So tonight I wanted to share with you some information about our traffic counts. We do an annual traffic count program. We've been conducting traffic volume studies all the way back to 1978. We have done a pretty good job of getting all of that information and that history of traffic studies that we have on our city website. Until COVID, we were doing every 3 years and doing the full city, kind of following COVID, and to kind of balance workload with the group that does the traffic counting, we've switched to studying 1/3 of the city each year. So this map here shows our fall 2024 count locations. And so we've kind of combined them all in that kind of southern section of the city. So those traffic count tubes will go out the last week of September. We wait until the community college is back in session so that we're getting a more accurate and realistic count of the vehicles using our roadways. So the traffic counts include 3 types of information. They include a volume. This is kind of a typical way to count the number of vehicles. It also collects the speed of the traveling vehicles, and then it does its best based on the information that the tubes collect to classify each of those vehicles as a type of vehicle. So, a single passenger vehicle, is it a semi-truck? And so they can really try and, based on those distances between the axles and information, they can usually classify them pretty well. And so we have an idea if the traffic on those streets is, passenger vehicles. It doesn't distinguish between, down to the level of school bus versus Amazon versus UPS versus a fire truck, but it can group them into groups. So we have a pretty good understanding of the volumes of vehicles using these roadways. Our GIS team has made some apps that the data is all stored in, and so the public can go in and start to see some of that information. Is there any questions on traffic counts? All right, Our next topic is 20 is Plenty program. So I didn't kind of pull the long history of this program and the discussions we've had, but I did pull a summary of the June TAC meeting. So John was here and shared with you some information. So back in June, John had a discussion with the city commission, and they essentially approved moving forward to engage the community and evaluate the community interest in the program. And so that's where John came back to you guys at your June meeting, and he shared the following suggestions. Confirm there's full consensus of the TAC members. Confirm TAC participation in a community outreach and public education campaign if we move forward with this program. Confirm with the police department the feasibility of enforcement of speed limits on local streets, and a review of a draft community survey. And so tonight, what I wanted to share with you guys is, I'm not sure John had this information at the last meeting, but in October of 2023, we did a community survey about the 20 is Plenty program. And so in the blue, we asked the question, do you support lowering the speed limit of residential streets from 25 miles per hour to 20? And they had 3 options: yes on all residential streets, yes on roads identified as key connections between parks, schools, and pedestrian generators, or no, I do not support lowering the speed limit. And so from that, if you take the yes on all and yes on key connections, we did have more than 50% interested in the program, but not a lot over 50%. So this kind of gives you that feedback that we collected back in October of 23. The second question we asked was, do you support lowering the speed limit on collector and arterial streets that have speed limits that are higher than the recommended speed?
Is there any way to make that question more understandable? Because higher than the recommended speed, what's the recommended speed on a collector or an arterial? And so it seems like your answers have no relation to the question.
Yeah, so kind of where the second question comes from is, historically, ODOT has always set speed limits at the 85th percentile, so the speed at which essentially 85% of the population drives at and is driving safely. The new guidance that came out just a couple of years ago now suggests we use the 50th percentile. And so for the most part, speed limits on our collectors and arterials are set at that 85th percentile. Using our traffic counts that we've historically taken, I picked a few key roadways and looked at the posted speed versus, the 85th and the 50th percentile. And there's a handful of them that could be dropped to 5 miles per hour. And so I think that's the question I was attempting to ask. And so you can see here, it was pretty close to 50-50 on that. So one of the questions tonight is, knowing we have this little bit of data from the community, do we want to do another survey? Do we want to amend the questions or change the questions? Do we just want to focus on 20 is Plenty? Or does this information kind of suffice for what you guys would be looking for from the community to help guide your kind of direction for the 20 is Plenty program?
Well, from my opinion, the first question, I think the answer is pretty clear, that at this time, it doesn't seem like there's much support for lowering en masse speed limit on residential streets. Now, that doesn't mean there aren't spots where it's proper and it should be done. And on the second one, I think that not knowing what the recommended speed is a fatal flaw in dealing with the answers. Simply because it's the recommended speed 35 on a 30-mile-an-hour street, or is the recommended speed 30 on a 35-mile-an-hour posted?
So I was present when John talked to the commission on this one, and I think some of the topics in there were things that might have been discussed previously as a group. One of the big ones that I was keyed in on was the support of the police department, because I think a big part of this puzzle, as much as even if this was overwhelmingly 75% saying they wanted the speed zone to change, is what real effect can we have on the process?
We've got that coming up for you.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So essentially, I wanted to make sure you guys kind of had this, it wasn't a lot of feedback, but it was some feedback. So my hope is that this helped you tonight. So what I also wanted to share with you is back, I think it was 2018, when John and I took this 20 is Plenty program to the city commission. Our recommendation was to implement it on family-friendly routes, or kind of that option where streets that connect your pedestrian generators. And after that, the commission wasn't interested in installing it citywide. The Kenema neighborhood reached out, said they were interested, gave us a letter of support. And so we moved forward, and you can see here, all the streets highlighted in yellow have had a 25 or 20 mile per hour speed limit adopted. The graphs are a little tough to read. So the yellow lines are 2017, so pre 20 mile per hour speed limit. And the blue lines are from 2021, after the 20 mile per hour was implemented.
Had the opposite effect.
And so the solid lines are the 85th percentile lines, and the dashed lines are 50th percentile. So, 5 years ago, we would have set the speed limit at the solid line, and today we would set it at the dashed line. So generally, we didn't see speeds decrease in the Kenema neighborhood. I didn't ask the neighborhood if they felt like the program was successful for what they were looking for. But the traffic count information doesn't show that we've seen generally a decrease in the speeds in the neighborhood.
So I probably asked you this question a couple years ago, and I don't think we ever got an answer from Portland, but has there ever been any data coming out of one of our cities locally that's done this, that either emphasizes what we found in our local counts? Have we heard anything from anybody else that's implemented this about their success or failure?
I've struggled to get a lot of feedback from Portland. I know a couple of other cities, kind of as we've talked about this over the years, have implemented the program. I believe Tigard's taken it on. I haven't reached out to Tigard to see.
Tigard was pretty recent. I'd be surprised if they have any accurate data at this point. I think it's been within the year
Oh, okay.
that they've adopted it.
And I know this is a small sample size, but it looks to be not an overwhelming.
Yeah,
result.
so essentially I wanted to share this because I think at one time we talked about, did we see speeds decrease in Kenema?
I'll just make one comment about these numbers here. I've seen some studies and some articles about Portland's speed limit, 20 is plenty reaction, and there have been 2 counts since Portland implemented 20 is plenty. One of those counts came out in 2021 and another one in 2023. And there were some articles that came out when their first studies came out in 2021. Oh my gosh, the speeds actually went up in 2021, it's a little misleading because people were driving like bats out of hell throughout the pandemic, just everywhere, no matter what the speed limits were. And it wasn't until 2023 that we saw those average speeds go back down. And, you know, who knows? Did 20 is plenty help with that or not? It's still up for debate, but the fact is, it's a statement of values for us. Do we value people driving at safe speeds on neighborhood streets, or don't we? You know, and is that an expectation that we're willing to set and have the police force enforce if necessary?
So that's a little bit of data that we've got. I also wanted to share that I think we must have talked about this in April as well. Not long after the April meeting, we got 2 letters of support from neighborhood associations for the 20 is Plenty program. So that came from the McLoughlin Neighborhood Association and the Elyville Neighborhood Association.
Okay, it's my turn for a slide here. I did speak with Oregon City Police Department, Chief Davis, and on the Oregon City PD traffic enforcement practices, in neighborhood streets, the patrol officers don't actively patrol those streets. They're patrolling arterials, collectors, areas that they know from history and from data that are problems. So anytime officers respond into a neighborhood for a traffic-related thing, whatever it is complaint-based, right? They do not make an active effort to go into the neighborhoods and do, radar detection, stake out and try to get people as they're speeding. They just don't. Another comment they had is, in their opinion, it's not likely drivers' habits will necessarily change with speed limits posted at 20 rather than 25. Some people probably will, some won't. And then certainly the random speeders, the ones that when we get our speed data, that everybody's right there in the speed limit in the 50th and 85th percentile on a 25-mile-an-hour road, and then you have somebody that does 40 or 45. Those are almost always, I'm gonna say always, very limited number. There's no engineering or enforcement that will deal with that. It's a young kid, it's somebody that's late, that's who's bringing that high speed number way up. But again, when you look at the data, and I've shown you folks speed reports before, it's just a very, very small percentage of the drivers collected. One point that was really driven home is that if 20 is plenty is enacted, whether it be in a neighborhood or citywide, the police department will not change their enforcement practices. He said it would not change it one iota. They will still react to calls in neighborhoods on a complaint basis and still concentrate their forces on arterials, collectors, main thoroughfares, and again, areas that they know, again, from experience, history, and data, that's where they need to be to do the patrol enforcement. I'm looking at my notes. Again, a couple things really reinforced. They spend the majority of the time on arterials, collectors, and school zones, obviously. School zones are a very high priority for the PD. And in fact, especially when schools get started, for the first several weeks or months, they're out at the school zones a lot. So that was the feedback I got from the PD.
Thank you, that's valuable information. From a discussion standpoint, I guess I would put it out there that if the evidence evidence is supporting one that the small sample size that we have in Kenema, backed with the fact that the police department is not going to enforce it, and then adding upon that, that the people are likely to not change their behavior just with a sign change. As much as I think we all would agree that 20 is a better speed through a neighborhood, if we can't actively enforce it or change behavior, then how much money do we want to throw at that specific problem? I know the city commission had talked in their last meeting more about traffic calming devices. So potentially, it might, in my opinion, would be better use of our time to look at more troubled areas. And I know the McLoughlin neighborhood has voiced an opinion on some of those ideas, but maybe put our time and energy into those traffic calming devices as opposed to something where we're not going to see a lot of feedback, or at least not the way we want to see it.
Well, you mentioned the McLoughlin neighborhood. They're one of the ones who've written a letter in support of 20 is Plenty, and they're well aware of our police department's limited resources. I think police department they work very hard, and where they're working are the right places to be working. I'm not expecting them to set up stings on neighborhood streets. That wouldn't be a good use of resources. But if there was a neighborhood street where there was an issue, 20 is Plenty would give us one more tool in their toolbox for them to set up a sting on a complaint basis, as Vance said. They could, if they got a neighborhood complaint about a specific neighborhood street where people are regularly driving 30, 35 miles an hour, if we had our speed limit set to 20, those people could get some significant tickets, and we could see some significant change in behavior. We might also see a significant change in behavior, especially now that we're post-pandemic and there's a expectation that people drive more safely on streets. We would get that change in behavior just from setting a citywide expectation that people drive more slowly on all our streets.
I want to make a comment. I think it's a good idea, but maybe if we can't get the whole Oregon City, maybe, McLoughlin can do kind of what Kenema did. And kind of take that, because it sounds like you got full support there.
And in Neelyville. So
Yeah,
that
take those two,
would
yeah.
get half the city with Kenema, McLoughlin, and Neelyville.
That would be an approach.
Sure. I mean, I'm willing to do that compromise if that's where the commission sits.
And we had a figure on the signage. It's been a few meetings ago, somewhat nominal.
Right.
It wasn't nothing. But I mean, if we're looking to support the neighborhood associations and they're believing that this would have a bigger impact than what we're seeing from our other information, I would support a targeted campaign, maybe start with one and get some more information that we could add to the Kenema speed counts and see if it does have a positive effect. So at a lower cost than going citywide, but yeah, I would support that.
So originally, one of the suggestions John and I had put together was to implement the 20 is Plenty on our family-friendly routes. And so this map in front of you shows both solid purple and dashed purple lines that represent our family-friendly routes in our transportation system plan. The plan includes a total of 33 routes. Their intention is to fill the gaps between shared use paths, schools, parks. They're essentially a network of lower volume streets for more comfortable biking and walking, with an intention that the biking and walking are prioritized over cut-through traffic. So when we looked at this originally, that definition to us jumped out and said, these seem like 20 is Plenty routes. And so we had kind of done a little audit on 6 or 7 different routes and looked at those. So this could be an option. Instead of implementing citywide, we could have targeted corridors that we look at. think, so here kind of takes us back to that list of list of items at the beginning. Is there consensus of TAC members for continuing to investigate the program? You know, geographic areas, maybe by neighborhood association, or small areas, or along those family-friendly routes? You know, I think it is not a ton of work, but like we've talked about before, each of those posts, the fasteners, the signs, you know, calling for locates. Most 25-mile-an-hour streets don't have speed limit signs, so it isn't just swapping out the sign for a new sign, it's buying the post, it's buying the fasteners, it's the staff time to go implement it. So it isn't something we can roll out quickly. We would need to budget for those posts and signs, plan ahead, you know, for off-season work. I mean, we're not gonna go out and put signs up during peak paving season. You know, so it's a balancing act of being able to implement it in a large geographic area or throughout the whole city. So kind of have that information, you know, did that 2023 survey get you enough? Do you want to do another survey with questions that maybe more clearly identify, you know, that second question? Or do we not care about the second question for now because we're really focused on 20 is plenty? That original survey was really both local and collector and arterial street speed limits. And then confirm that TAC is willing and gonna participate in the community outreach and the public education campaign. Because as we heard, it isn't gonna be enforced by the police department. So it's a public outreach and community education campaign that goes along with it.
So could an established HOA association, could they elect for their neighborhood to change the speed limit in their neighborhood?
Technically, yes. I think what we want to do is be a little bit careful. I don't want to just have like one random street here and one random street here.
No, but if, let's say they have 3 streets that operate their neighborhood and in their home, would they be able to say, in our neighborhood, we want a 20 is plenty? Because some may be cut-throughs and some may be, you know, dead ends where they still have to come back to the surface streets, but within the interior, they may want to control it down to, you know, 20.
You know, and I think those are part of this discussion. You know, I'd be hesitant to just have it on a few random streets. If we looked at something where it was family-friendly streets were eligible, or we, you know.
When we say family-friendly, what are we driving at? You're talking about people who do a lot of walking to parks?
Yeah, so we have got those 33 corridors that are family-friendly. So we could look at those ones and say those ones could be eligible. It's really up to us how we implement the program. But I worry if we just put one neighborhood with 4 or 5 streets, are we gonna go out and do public education? You know, we're telling the entire city that these 4 streets in this one neighborhood are 20 miles per hour. So if the vision of TAC is, you know, safer streets for pedestrians, that doesn't feel like it meets that vision.
What percentage of those family-friendly routes would be in the 2 neighborhood associations that have voiced their support? Would it affect them in a positive way? Would we be?
Well, we have zoning as the underlying map here, so I'm not super familiar with the boundaries of either of those neighborhood associations to
So
know.
McLoughlin would be a lot of those 5th, 7th, 9th, 12th, and 15th. The other one I'm not as familiar with.
Elyville is the one that's just to the south
Of,
of McLoughlin. Yeah, so they're bordering each other.
okay.
So you go up Malala, Elyville would cover that Malala corridor as well.
So the McLoughlin neighborhood would probably be more affected by
Or just.
than the other neighborhood association.
I do think Dana's getting on to something important there, which is we want to think about our messaging here, because I think we have consensus on our body here that we want to move forward with some kind of 20 is plenty expansion in Oregon City. So I think the message is very simple if we say, okay, 20 is plenty has been in Kenema since 2019, now it's going citywide. It's a little bit, it gets a little bit more complicated to message out to the community if we're saying, okay, it's expanding to 2 more neighborhoods, it's expanding to 2 more neighborhoods and these family-friendly routes. It's just a little bit, I think as a commission member, I'm willing to have as complicated of a message as we need it to be, but, you know, and I'm glad that we're all willing to move forward with some kind of expansion of 20 is plenty, but citywide would be.
So I would be hesitant to say we and all.
I'll disagree with you on that one.
Okay, well,
So maybe we're at the first checkbox.
Yeah.
sure. So, I mean, I guess I'll just speak for myself. I am in favor of moving forward with an expansion if the consensus is that we just move forward with a smaller expansion at this point, then I will support you all in that. But I just think it's an easier message, and maybe we should just go on down the line and see how others are feeling about it as well.
So I think a quick thing, and we can discuss this further if everybody wants, but maybe a quick vote of people who are in favor of moving forward to investigate the program and see if there is a consensus there. Would anybody be okay with that?
I don't know if we're ready for a motion. I think we should just kind of go down the line and get a temperature as to, you know, what's Petronella feeling. I haven't heard what Henry is feeling like. I haven't heard, Chris and Tim, you all voted for, we had a unanimous motion to recommend to City Commission that we move forward on 20 is plenty. So if we're no longer supporting that unanimous motion, then I think each of us should individually talk about why it is we're no longer supporting that.
So if anybody else wants to speak up.
So I can say more, or I know I was a big proponent of John Lewis going and talking to the police department. Because if we're gonna try to do something and they're not gonna support, then I don't really see a reason why. And even though that was a small data on Kenema, it does show what I wanted to see. Does it really help? Is it gonna, going forward, is it gonna help, you know, moving that, you know, even though I understand the safety issue of it. And another thing, I know the budget for the city, and we don't have money to do this. That's my 2 cents.
Well, living in McLoughlin area and having lived all my life on a collector street and being a walker in the general area, I don't see a problem that we need to address with this program. However, I think that we should keep the option open because there are certain areas where I think that it would be highly appropriate to be able to lower this 25 statutory speed limit to 20. And also, I don't think we have enough data on how current speeds, and ATV, the traffic volumes on residential streets correlate. And also, without any regulation, any action from the police department, it's purely a honesty, a voluntary thing on the part of the driver anyway. And there's some evidence in my mind that a bigger problem exists when we don't have a sufficient number of officers to even actively patrol our collectors and our arterials. So, the family-friendly routes, do we even have one that is totally built?
Well, those 33 are not built, which is why they're in the transportation system
So-
plan. So we could look at the corridors and see if they felt like they had, enough sidewalks and street lighting. But I think you could still implement it without the sidewalks and street lighting. So in Kenema, because there are no sidewalks, we had modified traffic control devices for the, we had signs underneath the speed limit sign that said family-friendly route. And then we also made a modified pavement marking that showed a pedestrian and a bicyclist instead of just a sharrow for bicyclists. And we placed those on the pavement in Kenema. So I think there's options if you were wanting to implement it on those family-friendly routes.
Chris?
I think I'll get off the soapbox.
I am in favor of the 20 is plenty. But I think budget is a huge thing. And Public Works would need the money before anything could be implemented. And with the police department shorthanded and not enforcing in residential, I don't think it'll go anywhere.
Just to be clear on your last statement, the police will enforce
Yes.
residential. They don't actively
Right,
go to residential
yes.
areas
Correct,
to do their patrols.
right.
I just want to clarify. Thank you.
Yeah.
Tim?
So I would say, depending on how the police are, don't have the manpower to go out there, it's all about perception. So if you want to get the speed limit down and you put it at 20, that means people do 25 instead of 30 or 35. If you take the experiment that we had on Holcomb where we dropped the speed limit there, it went from 50, 55 down to 35, 40. So if the goal is for the honest people to drop their speed, we don't need the police there standing there wasting their resources for the three that don't comply. And I think if you look at the Holcomb situation, see how the speed count is in there. I don't know if you got any data since we've switched that speed, because it used to be 45. What is it now, 35?
Which one?
Coming down Holcomb?
It's 35 now.
Yeah, I don't know, because I have to be on my brakes the entire way down the hill, because my car goes faster. That thing. So that, I know has dropped the speed, plus you've got the two crosswalks that they put in there. That's where you could do the perception of the honest people driving it down. Just like on 213, dropping at 5, I really wanted 10, because it's 65 going down that hill. So maybe we'll get a little,
I completely agree with you, Tim. Like, we're targeting the vast majority of residents who we have to assume are honest, law-abiding citizens. Yes, there will be
and those ones that want to
some
stick out, then the police can go after those people when they see them buzzing by everybody. And that's kind of, I think, what, it's the perception of how people will change. Just
Then
look
you-
at the budget, then after that, what the cost is gonna be to implement all these signs.
One quick comment, I hear what you're saying. I agree with most all of it. However, in a way, in my opinion, just Vance's opinion, when you talk about Holcomb Boulevard, and then you talk about neighborhood streets, It's apples to oranges. Because Holcomb has so much straightaway.
Right.
It's wide.
But it did bring
It
the
has-
speed down.
I do agree with that. I haven't done any data collection on Holcomb yet, but I would agree with that to a point. However, a lot of these neighborhood streets, we all need to keep in mind, as we sit here tonight, there's not a speeding problem. The police have done a lot of data acquisition through the covert box. My transportation division has done a lot of data collection. Have we done every street? No, we haven't. We've done a lot of streets. And more often than not, on a neighborhood street, we find that the 85th percentile is at or below the posted speed limit. So I just want to throw that out there. And I mention that because that wasn't the case with Holcomb. I'm with you, Tim. I think there was some real speeding problems on Holcomb. There still are.
There still is.
But I just want to throw that out there.
But the majority of it is like maybe 15% of those people they will not change their behavior.
Right.
And I don't think we can legislate for the outliers. I think that's gonna be a police catching them at the right time in the right place. And I'll go back to what problem are we solving? You know, if we had a history of incursions with pedestrians and fatalities in a large number, I would probably be much more up on the same soapbox that everybody else has come into in the past on this program. But the big thing for me was getting the information from the police department. Because even if we had a 75% survey saying that people supported it, and we did have a lot of the information that's telling us that this is something that we should pursue, if we don't have any way to actually change the behavior, and good citizens are already, Tim mentioned the good citizens, they're already gonna do the right thing. So if we don't have the stick, the carrot doesn't do us a whole lot of good. So my perspective is, would I like for everybody to drive 20 in the neighborhood? 100%. But am I willing to spend the city's very limited funds on a program that's not going to achieve the outcome that we want? That answer for me is no.
And I'll just say one more thing, which is, if the TAC is saying no to this now, and no one has made a motion to say no to 20 is plenty, but I'm hoping that doesn't happen, because that means our last motion still stands. But if someone were to make that motion, I would suggest, what are we saying to the McLoughlin and Elyville neighborhood associations who have all voiced support for this? We've had public comment come in here voicing support for this citywide initiative. The survey was a year old, and it surveyed 100 people. I don't know if those people were even city residents, or if they just kind of clicked the link that they saw on our city webpage. They could be people who like to drive quickly because they work in town and they like to be able to commute very quickly through neighborhood streets that they cut through. So I don't know who was providing the input on that survey and whether it's really representative of our citizenry. So in terms of the concern about our city budget, if the city feels that this is something that is important to them, that is a question for city commissioners to decide when they set their budget. And if I were a city commissioner, I would say this is important enough to set aside a small amount of resources each year and just do one or two streets at a time, just through the regular cycle of, you could start with those important streets and say we're going to prioritize McLoughlin and Elyville, those neighborhood streets that people are more likely to be walking through, and one or two streets at a time, so it doesn't have much effect on our budget each year. It doesn't have it doesn't do anything terrible for staff time. And we could just say that this is a priority for us as a city, just to start with McLoughlin and Elyville and work our way through. And anyway, I've spoken too much this meeting, but I feel very strongly about this issue, and especially if we're going to reverse a decision, I feel like we have to talk very seriously about that, because I think a lot of citizens would be disappointed in our reversal.
So a lot to unpack on that one. First thing I would, and I'll speak for myself and not for everybody else here, is that if we were to vote again on this, that the McLoughlin Association and the other association aren't going to be left in the dark with no options. We would try to address their concerns more specifically, as opposed to a broad stroke that we're talking about with this particular program. One of the other things in there is, we are an extension of the city commission, and we speak at their behest. So if they come back to us and say this is a program they absolutely want us to entertain and move forward with, we will go back to that and do what they choose. But I ultimately come back to the cause and effect. For me, is probably the two biggest things. That one, I don't have an identifiable problem of what we're solving. And two, I don't see the information that even if we were to take action, that we would actually fix said problem. So with that, I will open it back up one more time for anybody for additional comment. But at that point, I probably think we need to vote on item number 1 to see if it's even worth moving forward with. Okay. So I would move that we table the idea of 20 is plenty, and I will make a motion for that. Do I have a second?
I second it.
So can we have a vote?
Yes.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
I'm opposed.
So for the moment, we are going to go ahead and table this one.
All right, thank you. As Dana mentioned at the onset of the meeting, she's got to get to Gaffney.
Yep.
So, am I driving this thing?
Yeah.
I'm scared.
Just keep on going.
Okay, project updates and Holcomb Boulevard, Safe Routes to School. Dana had intended on presenting this.
Sorry.
Okay, no problem. I've got some notes here. It's a very short presentation, so it's only 2 slides. So bear with me, because I'm not involved with this project.
Okay.
So I'm going to read Dana's notes. The Holcomb School Road alignment has shifted approximately 6 feet to the west to accommodate the newly constructed sidewalks on both sides of the road. The ADA ramps at the intersection of Holcomb School Road and Holcomb Boulevard will be constructed with the rest of the sidewalks on Holcomb Boulevard. Dirt and Aggregate continues to work on Holcomb Boulevard, working on clearing the area for the new sidewalks and grading the area for the sidewalk, retaining walls, street trees, and light fixtures. New sidewalks have been constructed on the south side of Holcomb Boulevard from Oak Tree Terrace to the future RRFB crossing constructed by Icon for the Sears Farm development. Northwest Natural Gas is completing their gas line relocation work in Holcomb Boulevard, which will provide room for the city's stormwater collection system in Holcomb. Much of the work on the north side of Holcomb Boulevard is impacted by Lumen's schedule to relocate their utilities. Once that work is complete, the remaining power poles can be removed and the new storm system can be installed. Once that is complete, the contractor will begin constructing the forms for the new curb and gutter and sidewalk. The contractor currently expects the project to be complete by late November and into December. Staff anticipates hosting a walk, bike, and roll to school event once the work is complete to celebrate the project.
Vance,
Yeah,
on where Icon's work is going to be in the future, would it be possible to put a temporary blacktop sidewalk across that area so that we could have at least a passageway that wasn't on the street?
I just jotted that note down. again, Henry, I'm not involved in the
Talking about
project.
apron into this
So-
Sears project?
No, just along the edge, just
Yeah.
because he presented it like there was gonna be a gap in there of grass or something. And I'd like to see it so that it was,
You got it. Perfect.
hard surface,
Yeah.
not permanent, just
Sure. Yep, duly noted. We'll have to look into it again. My apologies that I'm covering this and I do not have those details.
I understand.
I have a question for you on this. So, I know Dina will have to be the one to answer this. We have an epidemic of gophers across this section with the construction people constantly cutting the street. Originally, it was planned that from the center line to the north, they would replace the asphalt. They have pretty much destroyed the center line to the south side of it. They just repaved that new section, and I come back and they've cut it again all the way across the street. So these people don't know where their utility lines are running. They keep cutting them and then burying them and then cutting them again. So can the city enforce that when they get this thing all done, that they put a complete layer over this so that it's not like the Oregon Trail driving through there? Because it never happens. Construction people go in, they tear up, they get their little pipes in, and then we have to, for 40 years, run the wagon down the dirt road. And since I drive down this hill every day, I'm gonna be a pain about it, because when we think they're done with cutting across this road, they keep coming back and cutting again after they've paved. How many times do you have to keep cutting in 7 feet from where you just cut before? I don't know what they're connecting to on the other side, if they're trying to bury utilities to get to the other neighborhood on the south side of the road there, or what it is, but the traffic delays have been 20 minutes in some mornings there, because we're down to one lane cutting it. So, I know you don't know the answer, but.
But what I can tell you is there are several times that in the onset of a project, the idea of, when they look at the scope of the work, right, where the project's gonna be, sometimes a half-street improvement or telling the contractor they're on the hook to pave half the street makes sense. As work progresses, maybe the scope changes, unforeseen things come in, now they're affecting the other side of the road. So typically, when that happens, the answer is yes, the city does have the contractor repave those areas. I have no idea why they're digging up in freshly paved areas. It could be pre-planned, okay? Because, okay.
Yeah.
If you don't wanna hear me.
I'm
you don't
agreeing
agree,
with
that's
you.
fine.
I understand that.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not being facetious on that. It's just that, there was, during the beginning of the construction, I mentioned it to John, and I said, hey, are they gonna go back there and pave this stuff? Because they made it really bad. And he went out there, or somebody went out there, and 4 days later, you guys had them, they were back out
Right.
fixing it. Because
Right.
they did horrible patch jobs on there. But the thing is, they need to be held accountable to make that road look nice when it's done.
Right, and that's what I'm trying to.
It looks great on the north side of it, but it looks bad on the.
During construction, it's very hard for the city to make sure that contractor keeps the road surface up to a point where it's just like a new road. It's part of construction.
Granted, I understand that.
Might be one of those situations where let's see what it looks like when the project is complete.
Right.
And then see if there's any issues at that point.
But truly, Tim, the city does do the best they can to hold these contractors accountable and do the necessary repairs. And I'm thinking, this is such a large project, there probably has been some scope creep, some unforeseen changes. I don't know, but there's a lot of variables that can go into the scenario that you've just described. Yeah.
And I just want to make a side comment. I know the city does a good job. They did it for us. They were there when we poured the street.
Yeah,
And they
like,
made sure that we did it right.
I think this morning I noticed they dug a square hole on the other side, and you can see the two green pipes. Now, I don't know if those are natural gas pipes,
They could be.
but they were, about that size each, and they were stacked on top of each other, and they had it all cleaned out. But now they're on the other side of the road where they said they weren't gonna be. And they've seamed it up from the old road to the new road, but now they're just digging away like crazy on the other side. So I understand that they'll have time to get it done, but I just want to make sure they finish it.
Yeah, understood.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, anything else on that?
Yeah.
All right.
And so November, December is when the sidewalks are gonna be done?
Yeah, that was, I believe, what Dana had in her notes. Currently, contractor expects the project to be complete by late November and into December. Yep. All right. Moving on, I think I mentioned to you I was going to give you just a quick update on our paving season this year. Very successful season. This first slide is roads, and I won't name them all, you can read them, they're right in front of you. Roads that were completed by the contractor that we had hired, I believe this year was S2 was the successful contractor. And they did a whole bunch of work. The roads turned out well. We are pleased with their workmanship on what they did. As far as I've been told, there's been very few punch list items in regards to the paving. So again, this is what was paid for through our pavement maintenance utility fee and contracted out. So these are larger jobs and roads that are above the capabilities of our in-house paving. This is a map that shows all the roads that were, am I out of order? I might have went too far. Well, at any rate, this map, if you can see the legend, this captures where not only the contractor touched city streets with paving, but it's where contractors slurry sealed streets and where in-house paving was performed. So that just kind of gives you, I know you can't read which streets, but to show you geographically how spread out we were through the city. Okay, these are our in-house paving projects. And the ones we did here in 2024, top of the graph, lower of the graph is what we intend to do in 2025. And I think I've mentioned this before, I'm very proud of my transportation crew. They get better and better at this every year. You know, paving is something that, like most things, you have to do it with great regularity to get better. And
Like
they're getting
painting.
better every single year.
It's kind of like painting your first room.
Exactly.
And then you do it a few more times and it looks a lot better.
Yeah. So anyway, you can see the roads that we've tackled. Again, this list, sometimes it's not the amount of roads, but it's the, you know, square footage or square yardage and how much tonnage. We do have our limitations with the number of trucks and personnel, the width of our machine. So that's where that private contractor comes in to do those larger, more technical streets for us. And typically, in the in-house paving, to try to be mindful of budget, whenever we do an overlay, and there's several other paving maintenance practices that trigger ADA. So we try to trigger the streets that don't have too many sidewalk ramps we have to replace with the in-house. We kind of leave that to the contracted out paving program through PMUF. These are all the roads we touched with the slurry seal project this year. And there is a bunch of them. Citywide, our PCI paving condition index is around 76. With the slurry seal on these roads, if you took the old PCI and recalculated the PCI after the slurry, it brings the PCI of these roads up to 82.1, which is a good thing. Because anything approaching or at 80 is really good. It's what every city, frankly, strives to do. Here's what we've got slated to slurry seal in 2025. I'm going to back up one real quick. So this year, 73,715 total square yards were slurried. Next year, we're projecting 67,737. So right in the same ballpark. Typically, it's about the same amount of square yardage. We have a pretty consistent pricing structure. We know what the prices historically are. They don't fluctuate as much with slurry seal as they do with asphalt, so we can get a pretty accurate estimate on what we have for budget. Well, we know what we have for budget. We can estimate pretty accurately how much of that we can spend on the slurry seal. And And that's it on the pavement program for the year.
So a couple of years ago, I don't know, it was 22 or 23, the price of oil was really high and you
Yep.
guys were like struggling with the bids coming in. Compared to that time to now, has that reduced quite a bit? And so you're able to get more road miles?
From what I'm gathering from Jason Thornburg, my transportation manager, who does the asphalt ordering and reaches out for quotes, because anything over $10,000, whether it's buying a vehicle or buying asphalt, we have to get quotes for, right? So he's reaching out to the local asphalt producers and gets quotes for any of these projects that are gonna be, again, over 10 grand, which a lot of them are. We haven't seen prices go down necessarily, but they've seemed to have plateaued out and we're not seeing the big spikes. Yeah.
Vance, is crack sealing done for the year?
Yeah, the weather, I mean,
Weather's gone
we
bad.
pretty much packed it all up. But we have been crack sealing this year for the slurry seal roads for 25,
Right.
and they're all done.
Would you have a look at Fifth Street, at Monroe, up about a half a block up the hill and a half a block down? It's going to pieces,
Fifth and Monroe, okay.
and
What's our average PCI citywide?
It's about 76, as I recall.
Okay.
I can get you an exact number though, Raymond, but it's mid 70s.
I was just curious, since you said we want to be above 80 and.
That's a
so-
lofty goal,
Okay,
but it's a goal, but it's a very lofty goal.
yeah, how much would it take to get us there? That's,
How many millions?
yeah, that's my secondary question, yeah.
I don't have a.
Okay.
I would hesitate to even venture a guess on that, but it would be a lot.
Okay.
All right,
Cool.
thank you. Audrey?
So I put together the few people that are due, their membership is due to expire in December of this year. I just received an email from the city recorder before this meeting, and the applications have opened up, so you're able to apply now. Normally, we do the interviews in November, so you'll want to get into the system, set up your account, do your application, and do everything if you want to renew your membership. And then we would have the interviews in November and invite the mayor to attend that, and then she would award those in January.
Thank you.
I just wanted to give, I think the past couple of years, like, we're just like kind of scrambling. So I wanted to like put that out there now, and that it's just opened as well, too.
Okay.
All right. Oh, go ahead, Bruce.
Oh, I was just gonna ask, do we have any open, what's our total?
We are at 9, and that's our full.
Perfect.
So if anybody chooses not to rejoin, then we'd have an opening, but
Okay.
otherwise, I mean, I guess technically more people can apply.
Correct.
And we can, accept other applicants, and everybody gets interviewed. There is no guarantee to be back in.
All right. Thank you.
You got it. All right.
All
Are we
right.
ready for Christina?
Yes, we're ready.
Does she get this?
She gets that.
I didn't break it.
The floor is yours.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you all for having me. Before I start, I printed out, this is a snapshot in time of the draft we're working on for the streetscape plan of 9090 McLoughlin Boulevard. So I've been September draft stamp. As you know, these are still working through ODOT, and we're still working through kind of the issues. So just know that this is a snapshot in time. But I have all of these pages up on the PowerPoint, but just in case you want to go home tonight and want to refer to it, you can take it with you. But also know that this is not the final version.
Okay.
All right. So thank you, Christina Robertson Gardner, Senior Planner. This is both a Public Works managed project and with support by the Planning Division. And so as Senior Planner, I've been supporting Dana through this year. So this fall, we are providing an update to a lot of boards and commissions, and you are the first board and commission, so you get to see our newest PowerPoint and kind of providing both updates, but also a chance to hear comments and ask questions as we kind of move forward into the adoption process, we want to make sure we're not kind of missing either expertise that are on our different boards and commissions, but also the lived experience that, people have used biking, walking, driving on McLoughlin Boulevard. So the purpose and need, you can see all there, that's the pretty, official bulletin point, but this all started 20 years ago with the adoption of the McLoughlin Boulevard Enhancement Plan, where we realized we had a highway through our city that was not very friendly to pedestrians and bikes and really even cars. So with that adoption of that corridor plan, we've been working on different phased implementation. So the first phase was really in the middle part, kind of from 10th Street to the I-205 on-ramps. And that's where you see the new trees. We added basically where every open space we could provide extra greenery. We tried to find a place. We worked on reducing the speed on McLoughlin Boulevard about 20, or when we started that conversation as how can we have people stop going 55, 60 miles an hour down McLoughlin and turn it more into a, arterial, roadway. The second phase was kind of the Dunes Drive to the Gladstone Bridge, so that work right in front of the Oregon City Shopping Center. And phase 3 was the most complicated section. And so a couple years ago, we applied for a grant to start to look at that really complicated section, which involved the viaduct. So a viaduct is like a bridge, but rather than having a bridge span an opening between two known land areas, a viaduct, there's certain ports of 99E that are only partially on basalt. So there are areas that are a bridge structure for about three blocks. So with that 1940s viaduct with kind of crumbling sidewalks, no, not ADA compliant, and really no ability for bikes. So while you can walk along 99E in that area, it's not very pleasant. And it's not really the community's goals of, rather than turning our back to the river, which kind of was done during the industrialization of our city, we wanted to turn around and face the river and have a lot more interaction between the Willamette River and our historic downtown. And so with this goal, we had really two outcomes that we wanted to look at, which is how can we make biking and walking along this section of the viaduct and 99E much more pleasant, so people really could have a full walking experience right from the Gladstone Bridge through Clackamas Park all the way up onto 90, through the viaduct area, and then really to Tumwater Village and to continuing areas south. So we have this continuous ability to walk along the Willamette River. But also, how can we take the phase 3 area that has a lot of concrete and very little trees, very little vegetation, and some areas that are pinch point and other areas have really odd, big, open, shy areas, and make it a more of a commercial urban street. So it's really a two-pronged project, which is how do we adopt a new streetscape plan for this section of McLoughlin Boulevard? And then how do we think about long-term how we want to get pedestrians along the whole frontage of the Willamette River in Oregon City? So we have a gap in safe and comfortable facilities. We have a very disjointed section of 99E. And Oregon City has a larger tourism and economic and community development goals to reconnect to the Willamette River. So this is the project area. This is phase 3, which either called Tunnel to 10th, so the railroad tunnel, or Tumwater Village to 10th. But you'll see within the boundary, it is McLoughlin Boulevard within that boxed area. The reason Main Street is added to the project area is whenever you do a good engineering design study, you have to have a no-build option. So as part of this process, what happens if there is not an option for pedestrians and bike to safely get along the Willamette River? Then the no-build option would be directing bikes and pedestrians to cross probably at 10th and to utilize Main Street as their way to get through. So that would be the kind of send bikes through Sharrows on Main Street and redirect folks to walk part south through Main Street. and really not change the existing condition of the riverside of the viaduct. So as part of the planning process this last year, our design team came up with a lot of different options for pedestrian structures on the river. One thing we heard from ODOT that we could not do because of the age of the 1940s viaduct is attach anything onto the structure. So anything that was built would have to be its own independently structurally supported structure. You couldn't just, put a little add-on and have a pedestrian path. There also was maintenance requirements. So ODOTs have a kind of a maintenance boom truck that has to get up, over, and under to inspect the viaduct. So whatever is done has to be adequate space between the viaduct and whatever is built to allow for that continuous inspection of the viaduct. So raise your hand if you participated in the December virtual open house last winter, where you maybe went online and looked at some options to see which option of pedestrian paths may be something. Anybody remember that?
It sounds vaguely familiar.
Okay, there was
Yeah.
kind of a link to like an online survey, and we had kind of the upper path, and one would potentially got you down along the river.
Yes.
Yeah, so as part of that open house, there we go, oh, look, there's that slide. As part of the open house, there was lots of different options that the design team they wanted to throw more options and see kind of what both the community wanted, but they could also use those options as they went through kind of the engineering and structural analysis and permittability analysis. And really what we heard at the winter open house was people wanted to improve traffic flow on McLoughlin Boulevard. There were some questions if there was ever going to be a removal of traffic lanes, and this is not. This is about helping bikes and pedestrians better use the area, and also try to increase streetscapes to have a more urban space rather than a highway. Make it safer. And then people really like the idea of those connections, both to Tumwater Village, at the former Blue Heron Paper Mill, existing connections we have at Clackamas Park, and at other opportunities to get access to the river. It's kind of really seen this as a gap in that connection. And then really just this is, the first two phases are done, and this phase has definitely shown the kind of what happens when you don't have, you have an existing condition that hasn't been changed over the years. So we definitely heard that. What we sent all that information to our design team, and they started looking at all the alternatives. And pretty quickly, they realized that none of the alternatives could structurally be built. And I'll try to talk a little bit why, and also be permittable. Two options came out of those conversations that were not in the public open house. The design team and the bridge engineers, well, what could be built? As they pushed back and they had conversations with our permitting agencies and ODOT, which owns the infrastructure. And one is the conventional viaduct with 2 signature spans. The other was the long span. So the long span is what kind of bubbled up out of the process, is really the only viable alternative. And I'll kind of talk through their analysis of how they came to that. So this slide I've always really liked. The bent, you'll see the numbers where it's like bent 1, bent 2. That is where they would, when they were looking at the different options of having a structure kind of parallel to the roadway, where would they be putting the support structures? And so a bent is where a support structure would be hitting the basalt. And you'll see between bent 5 and 6, we have where Singer Creek historically went out, and we had the 8th Street dock, so for the kind of that area underneath the viaduct. So that was a area that needed to be spanned. So conventionally, they could design a little kind of bridge structure to go from 5 to 6. That was reasonable. But then as they were getting closer to bents 11, 12, 13, and 14, which is on the south side of the Arch Bridge, there was no basalt. That area of the Willamette River is very deep. You'll see where it says blue, the dark blue says 80 feet to 120 feet. And then the light blue is 20 feet to 40 feet. So basically that kind of area, just as you go south of the arch bridge and that seawall, it just goes down to about 80 feet to 100 feet. And so they would have to provide another bridge structure to have that gap, right? You really would have to have something that goes from bent 10 all the way to bent 15. So in a sense, you're having, conventional pathway, bridge number 1, conventional pathway, sliding through the arch bridge, another little bridge structure, and then a little more conventional pathway as you get to bent 16 and 17. So that turned out to be that's that 2 signature span. It was a very convoluted design. It wasn't a very attractive design. It competed with the arch bridge visually. And while it technically could be built, the permitting wise would be really hard. And so what the designers really looked at, well, how could we build something that could be permitted, but also reduce the amount of excavation points? This area is highly known, and by many tribal nations, this is an important historic area, and there are potential opportunities for having archaeological findings in any dig area. So what happens when you find something 3 or 4 bents in, so the idea is that the risk gets high because you don't know until the unknowns are not known. And so our bridge specialists really looked at and said, well, is there an option that really only had 2 posts, 2 pillars, one kind of that bent 1, 2, 3, and one right kind of around bent 16 and 17. These were known basalt areas. You only have 2 excavation areas. You could even do some pre-excavation and only 2 little areas to figure out. So you greatly reduce the risk and and moving forward for constructing the bridge. And so that was the long span approach. And they said, really, if the community wanted to move forward, it would have to be a pedestrian option that really had only 2 foundations, one on each side, and really was a cable stay, which, that was a tensioned pedestrian kind of walkway that was tensioned by the two foundations on either side. So that's what it looks like. So this is just a conceptual drawing, but you'll see there really is only 2 foundation points, one at the north and one at the south. And the pedestrian walkway threads itself through the arches of the historic arch bridge. So see, if you look back at the historic arch bridge, you'll see on the top right, there's 2 arches that or posts that fall below the deck of the arch bridge. The path would be at the one, not the closest one to the pillar, but the next one over. It would be, because you need that distance, right, for ODOT to look at the viaduct. So this is the long span. There are a couple kind of bents, 1, 2, 3. There's some opportunities for some foundational posts, but really the main support of all of it are these two main pillars. And you'll see that it is a tension. So I don't have but you'll see the kind of light blue. It has this little tension wire. So the lowest point, it kind of meets down right at the arch bridge, and then it will go back up. So in a sense, it kind of makes a T with the arch bridge at the lowest point, threading through underneath the deck of the 43 bridge. So and this is really some of the advantages. It minimizes those foundations, so it really reduces the unknowns of a foundation excavation along a shoreline in Oregon City. It's a pretty light and shallow superstructure, so the bridge deck is a pretty standard bridge deck that they could thread through. The maximum clearance below deck, so you would be, the lowest point would be a little bit lower than 99E, kind of right underneath the arch bridge, and then kind of both sides, you kind of make your way back up to street level at 99E. They said it's pretty prefabricated. You can work in the dry area, so you're not doing lots of in-water work, which greatly adds complexity to a project. It's a contemporary solution, intentionally different than the ARCS Bridge. There's always a question of how best can we design one of these to not adversely affect our historic arch bridge. There may be nothing that can be built that doesn't adversely affect it in a historic way, but this is kind of all the alternative analysis, this is the best option to have the least amount of impact through the arch bridge. So the challenge is, it's always, complicated to span through a 1920s bridge. The two towers have a larger foundation, but there are only two, but they would be smaller than any individual foundation if we had, 20 of them. But it will take a specialist design and contractor to build. So that's kind of the advantages and challenges they kind of came up with this spring as they presented to the city commission, said, do you want to move forward to keep looking at if this can be permittable and to continue our engineering due diligence, or do you want to stop and kind of choose the redirect pedestrians and bikes at 10th Street onto 99, or onto Main Street? And the city commission said, don't move forward, let's learn more about it, let's see if it's permittable, let's see, finish your work, let's see what we're looking at. And so kind of march through this summer, they just kept doing the work. They kept working with ODOT, they're working with the Corps, they did, they're looking to see are there any fatal flaws? So this is a conceptual level design, but their goal is, have we done enough conceptual level analysis that we kind of exhausted our fatal flaw analysis, and we understand what the next steps are if you wanted to move forward for the kind of next step of design. So the other piece of this whole plan is the placemaking aspect of the streetscape design. So the non-structured part of 99E. This is the non-pedestrian bridge part. So there are a lot of opportunities to create more green area. Could there be a linear park, landscaping benches? Are there community space opportunities? These just, there's a example of a project that kind of showed how you can take an existing roadway and turn it into a linear park. It's not exactly, but it kind of gives you how you could reclaim space. At the bottom, I thought was a great one. This is just an alley that, you can repurpose. And so I'll show you that as it relates to the area under the arch bridge on the city side, kind of as you move from 99E to Main Street. There's also some underutilized areas under the arch bridge there. So the streetscape, below you'll see this is our existing condition in our phase 1. You can add more bulb outs, landmarks, lighting, wayfinding. We can change materials. We can add landscaping. We can have art, interpretive signage. Really is a way to tell people once you've gone north, you've exited the tunnel, the train tunnel, you are now entering kind of downtown Oregon City, and you should be driving like you are in an urban space. And so you use streetscape amenities to signal to folks, a little bit like, your conversation on 20th Penalty, is you use these to signal to folks like, you're now in an urban place, you should be driving at urban speeds. And so one thing we have been working with, and you'll see in your pack, we've been working with ODOT and really trying to reclaim any underutilized space in this section of McLoughlin Boulevard. This is a freight corridor, there's specific requirements for width, there's specific requirements for, dimensions, but what's left? What do we have to work with in the outer area, and what can we do with it? We've heard from the community, we want to keep as much parking as we can. And so with understanding that, what can we do? And so I want to walk through, I'll walk through the slides as we go from the southern end at the tunnel, and we'll work our way north to 10th Street. There were 3 areas that the design team said, well, we think there are 3 areas that we could add additional open space or we could keep as parking. And one nice thing about being at a conceptual level with a corridor plan, we can adopt both because we don't have to make that hard choice today. And so we went to the commission this summer and said, is there any of these options you don't want to move forward? And they didn't find one. So I'll show you kind of the 3 areas and what would it look like with existing parking retained, and what would it look like if more open space was added? And if we, if this plan adopts both, we can apply for grants. And if we get the money as we start the project, then we can make the hard choice and go back to the public, because it may be 3 to 5 years before we are in a place where we have to actually make that call. And Main Street may be different. People may have different plans. There may be a hybrid approach. We can get, since we'd be doing the design at that point, we don't have to make that choice today. And we can keep all of our options open. So as we start at the tunnel, moving our way north, to our right is Railroad Avenue. You'll see the deceleration lane. This is a project that actually was approved in 2014. It's in coordination with the master plan for the former Blue Heron site. When that area hits a certain trip generation, it's a safety project. So right now, when you exit the pedestrian area of the railroad tunnel, you basically fall into Railroad Avenue, and cars go very fast when they're taking a right. And so what this does is this provides a refuge area for pedestrians. So as you kind of see that area that's marked in the hashed area, that would be a pedestrian refuge island. So the pedestrian wouldn't be crossing till farther up. The city would require some condemnation of that corner of the parking lot. That deceleration lane also will encourage people to slow down when they're turning right onto Railroad, once again, transition into an urban street from a highway. Moving up north, you'll see new curb extensions, a goal for a public art project or a gateway project designed to be determined. We want to investigate, are there any additional kind of markings or material change at the 99E Main Street intersection we can look at. So these are all kind of tagging future design questions we would want to work on when we actually got to a place where we're receiving grants to build it. On your left, you'll see some hash marks. The Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde received their own grant a couple years ago, and they will be building their frontage of 99E, as well as a new Water Avenue and 4th Street. So they're coming in this next year with their own kind of capital plan to improve some streets on their site. So we'll be integrating in to make sure we all match. As you move north, we're looking at retaining the existing parallel parking that's kind of in front of White Rabbit. There's space for it, and so we're proposing to keep that. It's on the corridor today. So here's an example of keeping two options. The inside of the elbow is actually ODOT right-of-way, and there's some existing parking, and the existing owner has an agreement to use that. So if we move forward, there's an option to keep that parking, and there would be some kind of more of a driveway entrance and exit, rather than kind of the open area that exists today on the inside of the elbow. The other option would be to make that open space, add more landscaping, trees, designed to be determined. So adopting this allows us to keep both options open as we move forward. 6th Street, it's one way, just closing that pedestrian gap with new bulb outs. Move forward, this is kind of two options as we get to the area kind of abutting at the historic Arch Bridge. The area up on top kind of shows how to keep the existing parking areas kind of redesigned a little bit, but able to keep existing on-street parking in this version. And the area below removes that on-street parking and looks for a potential open space. The area under the Arch Bridge, there are a couple of vehicles that currently have a parking permit to use the area under the Arch Bridge. So there's kind of two driveway cuts that take you up. At one point, you're allowed to drive your vehicles up to Main Street. We removed that ability when we redid Main Street a while back. But the question is, do we want to have kind of a pedestrian plaza that you would walk down from Main Street on either side of the arch bridge that kind of then brought you into the new pedestrian walkway. So kind of back to what you can do with just a very little amount of paint and activity showing that alleyway. So it wouldn't be very fancy, but it would be, retiring those parking permits at the time it made sense for construction and looking at how to activate that as more of a plaza. The other option shows how you would retain that. The pedestrian crossing along 99E kind of shifts depending on if you're keeping those driveways open or not. So that kind of just shows both variations. So once again, looking at adopting both options. So we have a project page, both on the Public Works website and on the planning website. They're the same page mirrored. If you want to keep up to date, TAC should be receiving emails from me. Do you receive any emails kind of from Christina Robertson Gardner giving you any updates on the project? Okay.
I don't recall.
I will make sure all of you are added to the project update. And I give kind of when there's new information, I provide a general update for folks. We have probably 250, 300 people on our list. And what that means for next steps that are happening, this is the McLoughlin Boulevard Enhancement Plan was an amendment to the Transportation System Plan. And so what the next steps for this project is to amend the McLoughlin Boulevard Enhancement Plan. So we're amending the TSP to add this refined corridor plan in the TSP, which will allow us to apply for grants. So actually tomorrow morning, Dana is making a presentation on one of a couple of grant opportunities we may have. This one is really more for just the streetscape improvements, along with we're looking at maybe adding this plus some other pedestrian projects in the city to have a big enough package. But she's looking at doing that presentation to see if that's an opportunity for us to potentially just move forward with streetscape enhancements. There's another opportunity where we'll look at streetscape enhancements as well as further design work on the long span approach. So the October 28th will be the first Planning Commission hearing for the hearings to adopt this corridor plan into the Transportation System Plan. And so, I can get that information to you, and then we will have within the next, I think, week or two, we'll have the version we want to use to update. So the version you have here, which is the September, will be updated with the latest. We're kind of still having some small conversations with ODOT. So we want to get that wrapped up, and that'll be in the final version. I'm available for any questions you may have. It was probably a long presentation, but I wanted to give you a little context of where you are. This is a complicated project. This isn't, we left it for the last phase for that reason, but we can't ignore it. So we're really trying to figure out what can we work on today? What's our long-term approach? And then how do we kind of keep moving the next steps to get there? And it's a pretty ambitious bridge, so people don't deny that, but you can't build what you don't adopt. So we can't even have further conversations unless we as a community say this is something we want to look for in the long run. And then you start looking at partners and figure out, what other partners are doing, how it relates to other work in the region, but you can't have those conversations unless you adopt it.
I want to commend our city commission and hardworking planning department for coming up with what is a beautiful preliminary design. And I saw that image that was up on just one slide there, and I know it's very preliminary, but as a photographer, I can imagine being on the Westland side and seeing that and being like, wow, this is a place that I want to go to and photograph and visit, and the opportunities for placemaking that are in there as options depending on what the city commission adopts. all of those are really fantastic opportunities that you all have come up
And you
with.
really nailed it. The commission was really interested in making sure whatever's adopted as a placemaking tool and a community amenity, and not just a, pedestrian path, right? So like, if you're gonna spend this kind of money, this needs to be a new, community identity and something that really does connect, so when folks, both the tourists, the regional folks, but also, there will be, I didn't really show it, but, there's gonna be opening at the Arch Bridge. So the idea is, there's many ways to get between the river and downtown. You're not in a straight shot. We wanna really integrate and have people be able to walk at the river and back both, and then walk between downtown and Tumwater Village and try to find as many different finger connections as we can.
I got a question, but mostly about access across McLoughlin. During the process of looking at that long span, was there anybody bringing up the question that you can only get to it from the two ends and you can't get to it in the middle?
Well, actually, you can. So the one thing I didn't show is there is plans to provide access, and actually, I think, so we said that was a non-starter. We didn't want people to feel trapped. We needed to have a central connection. So, okay, so right here, I think, let's see. Yeah, so do you see where, right at the Arch Bridge on the top one, it says connection to shared use path via bridge to corridor. So right kind of on either side of the Arch Bridge as it goes through that span, they'll be looking at, ideally on either side, but ways to connect up the pedestrians to go straight into the bridge from there.
So essentially, one end, and then one in the middle.
And actually one more, I didn't talk about one thing. One thing that the commission really wanted, and it's not shown on this version because this was like that first pretty version, but there really was a desire to have an additional pedestrian crossing at 8th Street. And really looking at a potential to have an under viaduct crossing. So the latest version, which will come out, and that they're still kind of working the mock-ups on, and the commission saw kind of variations of, if you look at, actually, it's really close to where you would go down the street today for those steps down to the 8th Street dock, in that area between the Clackamas County Courthouse and the viaduct.
Where the existing stairs are?
It would basically be turning that into an ADA pedestrian ramp that would run underneath the viaduct and connect. They're still working on, it took a while to look at the design, because you're chasing grade, and that's always, it's longer than people think to chase grade to meet, ADA slopes, but that is the goal, is to have the ability to walk underneath at 8th Street and head back. So really you have the connection at 10th, 8th, 7th, and then you really do have to wait till you get to Water Street at Tumwater Village, because of that section that you really don't have any opportunities to connect to at the elbow. So thank you. There's a lot of moving parts for this project, but that is a slide that the commission really wanted to see, and having another pedestrian activated beacon, they thought would affect kind of the AM and PM peak traffic. So that is that balance between, it is still a highway. And so they really wanted to look for that under crossing.
So I have a question. So there is a commitment from the tribe to develop that area?
So Tumwater Village, which is the former Blue Heron Paper Mill, the Confederate Tribes of Grand Mountain is looking at updating their master plan and turning it in this fall, winter. So you'll be seeing there'll be a planning commission master plan hearing sometime in the winter, early spring.
So will they need to widen that section of the curve? So
No,
that you have
no.
a turn lane to go into that area?
No, none of the, and actually the 2014 master plan looked at a specific trip generation, and there was no indicated need. What is new, though, is you will now be able to have a new water street. So I'm going to go to the plans a little bit. It's a little off topic, but you see to the far right, and this, where it's hash marked, because that is actually the work that Confederate Tribes is working on right now. They'll be coming in for approving that kind of street improvement as part of their master plan this winter. But they'll be in the parking lot of what was the administration building of Blue Heron, actually was Old Water Street. Like a lot of things on the middle, those streets were vacated. So they'll be bringing back Water Street in that right of way. And so there'll be a new connection of right in, right out into Water Street, and there'll be a new 4th Street. 99E actually in this section is 5th Street. We don't think about it, but as you turn the corner, that little section actually is 5th. So behind that will be a new 4th. So there'll be a new loop that the Tumwater Village will be building in these early phases, which is a new Water Street. Oh, sorry, don't really have the thing. So a new Water Street, a new 4th Street, and then a loop back onto Main Street.
Okay, and then in addition to that, where you did in the north section of McLoughlin, where you did all the greenery, is that going to continue?
Where we can find it. So, it's really just a math game of where there's area, because, as a freight route and pinch points, there's a certain amount of dimension, and where there's areas that we can put a median, we will. Some medians will be wide enough to be, have vegetation, and some are too skinny. And so it might be the rock medium. It really is and so as you see in here, that level of detail is really not at the conceptual phase. ODOT has a kind of a standard, practice of when you get to it, you'll do this type of medium or this type of medium. And so this is area has less opportunity for medians, though there is either going to be a right in, right out at the Water Street curve, or there'll be a center medium where you can't turn. But you will only be able to get in, right out at that Water Street for safety reasons. You wouldn't want people turning left. So still working on the design approach, but there's less opportunities for mediums in the middle because of the right-of-way span in this section. But there's some opportunities, kind of that bend. There's some opportunities for, we will be putting street trees as part, all of 90 McLoughlin Boulevard. The city maintains street trees where we are allowed to put them in. I mean, it's still an ODOT facility. It's something we maintain because it's a value we have as the city that we want street trees along this area. So we'll be working with ODOTs on the details of where each individual street tree could go, but it's something that the city will own and maintain.
Oh, hey, another question. Could you go to the 6th Street
Sure.
slide there?
Yeah.
I would recommend that you make 6th Street not exiting onto McLoughlin, but exiting onto Main. That corner right there, having used Morton's parking lot, I will tell you that is almost a blind intersection right now. And to have traffic coming into it at a 90-degree angle is probably asking for a lot of.
So right now it's a one-way out.
You want 6th Street to go
Oh,
to Main Street.
Yeah, I can pass on that question to Dana. I know that's an ODOT site circulation, and I know we've had this conversation before, and I don't remember the outcome, but we can give you an update. It is I think it relates to the Highway 43 bridge. And I don't know if we can, but yeah.
It is pretty near a blind intersection, and you're just funneling traffic right into it.
Yeah.
Christina, I have a question.
Sure. Henry, I don't disagree, so I'll follow you. I know 6th Street has always been a lively conversation with everybody.
I'd even like to see it as a cul-de-sac.
So I have a question regarding parking. Parking has always been an issue, and I love the green space. I'm kind of like you. I could just vision this. We need something like that in Oregon City where we can attract people to come here. And but parking has always been an issue. Is there any plans to do anything with parking? I know that the Blue Heron site, they're gonna have a parking garage, but I don't know when that's gonna happen. But until then, or something like that, do you have?
Yeah, so Ryan Kersey with our code enforcement is kind of our parking manager guru, and I'll put on his hat for a moment. You know, we have an existing parking management, program downtown. We always look at we do parking studies every once in a while. We look at do we have the right fees for downtown? Are we, how's our parking permits going? Are they priced right? And there's some recommendations. Our city commission moved forward with a couple of them last year. One is to add you can do a little add-on. Let's say, I forget which one, if it's 90 minutes, you can add more. But the idea is when you're on the app, you can add an extra bit, but we're not signing it because we want downtown like a restaurant, like turning tables, right? We want as many people as possible to be able to park downtown. And so, but we also have people who have a little bit longer commitments. So it's that balance. Looking at our parking permits, we're much lower than the market for permits than the private market, so we price that correctly. But we have a lot of, restaurant workers who want safe places to park when they get off at 10 p.m. They don't want to have to walk blocks and blocks. So there's a lot of balancing act. I think with the commission right now, because the courthouse is closing and relocating, there'll be a point in a couple of years where the city will have to figure out what's our new normal for parking, because how people parked and we call them compelled visitors, that changes. So there'll be some new data collection, most likely a year after the new courthouse opens, to kind of see what our new normal is. And we may find like there maybe the shift of the parking area has moved, where more people want to park here when they used to want to park here. And so we may want to be shifting our zones, or we need more data, because all of our data up until now has been based on a Monday, through Friday courthouse. So that's one of the reasons why we are keeping both options, because we just don't know where the parking demand will be in the future.
Yeah, I know I've talked to the DOCA people, and that was one of their biggest concern as well. They want people to come down there, use these restaurants and be able to do that, but parking was always an issue.
Yeah. One thing, Rick Williams, our parking consultant who works all over the region, and he's like, it's very simple. You just need to use all the tools in your toolbox to look at your heat map and move the people in the red part of the heat map to orange, and the orange people to green. And so it's like, how are we just using all those tools to just nudge people to go one block further? And if we can do all that nudging, we might have more, because there are a lot of places farther out that have lots of parking options in our downtown, but everyone wants to park one block away. So how do we use our tools to help get other people to utilize the underutilized spaces?
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
That was
no problem.
a great presentation.
Yeah, so look for, I probably won't have an email coming for a couple of weeks, but I'll add you to the email list, and you can kind of track what's going on.
Wonderful.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are we able to bring up our agenda, Audrey?
That is the last item.
I assumed it was. I assume we are at the point where if we want to have any communication for new business ideas for next month, anything you guys want to get on the agenda?
I think so.
No?
That's what I can think
Going
of.
once, going twice? In that case, we can go ahead and adjourn.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, folks, appreciate it.
So